You're about to be exiled to an isolated island for the rest of your life. You can only take 8 CDs with you. Which 8 do you take? Tough question. Here's my answer. Hey there, Swan Shadow here. Welcome back to the nest. Desert Island Discs is a program that has been running continually on BBC Radio since 1942. I'll save you the calculation. That's 83 years at the time of this recording. The reason the show has lasted practically forever is the compelling nature of its premise. Guests, usually British celebrities of some note, are asked to imagine themselves as permanent castaways on a desert island. They can choose 8 and only 8 audio recordings, usually music albums, to take along with them. And of course, the discussion of each person's choices reveals various aspects of their personalities. Plenty of music fan YouTubers have undertaken similar challenges. I've seen videos where the participants allowed themselves anywhere from 5 to a dozen recordings. I thought I would stick to the parameters of the original radio program and give myself 8 albums. That would make the task plenty challenging enough because I could easily list hundreds of albums that I really enjoy. Cutting the entire expanse of recorded music down to a mere 8 albums for the rest of my life, however long that might be? Alrighty then. The first thing I thought about is, how do I go about choosing? Do I try to figure out who my 8 favorite artists are and then choose my favorite album by each of those artists? That would certainly be one way of doing it. But if I did that, I might come up with several rather similar albums because, like most people, I have a certain amount of overlap in styles among my favorite artists or bands. And if these are the only records I get to listen to for the rest of my life, I'm going to want some variety. I'm not going to be in the mood for the same kind of music all the time. My tastes are too eclectic for that. Another approach would be to come up with what I think are the greatest albums of all time and choose those. The problem with that is that greatness, however you define that, doesn't always equate to personal enjoyment. When it comes to film, for example, I believe that Citizen Kane is probably the greatest artistic achievement in motion pictures that I personally have ever seen. But I don't get the urge to watch Citizen Kane all that often. Whereas there are plenty of movies that I will readily admit are just kind of cinematic junk food that I can watch over and over and over again. The same thing is true with music. There are quite a number of albums that spring to mind when I think about the greatest albums ever made, at least in my opinion, but most of those I don't throw on to listen to on a frequent basis. So making the choice based on greatness, as I perceive it, would leave me with a group of records representing spectacular artistry, but I might not want to spend the rest of my life just playing those. So instead, I decided to think about niches. What are 8 areas of music, not necessarily genres, but more like musical cravings that I need to satisfy at different moments in my life? And what's an album that would satisfy each of those particular musical cravings? When I thought about it that way, I came up with a list of 8 that in some ways surprised even me. Let's take a ride. So the obvious niche first, favorite band, favorite album. As I said, I was determined not to fill the entire list this way, but I decided I absolutely needed 2. And the first of those 2 is Point of No Return by Kansas. I have been in love with the music of Kansas since I first heard their 3rd album, Mask, all the way back in 1975. But while Mask still retains the honor of hosting my all-time favorite Kansas song, Icarus, Born on Wings of Steel, it's not my favorite album by the band. And while I think that Left Overture, the follow-up, to Mask, released in 1976, might be their greatest creative achievement, my favorite Kansas album overall is Point of No Return from 1977. Compared to Leftoverture, Point of No Return might be a little bit less grand in scope, a little bit less ambitious, but it's the songs on that album that really resonate with me. They're overall shorter, tighter, more focused than the sprawling epic nature of most of the tracks on Leftoverture. Point of No Return is an album I can sing along with more so than Leftoverture. And if I'm stuck on a desert island, I'm going to be singing to myself a lot. If you've watched my video ranking the albums of Steely Dan, and if you hadn't, you should totally do that when you're done here, you already know that The Royal Scam is my favorite Steely Dan album. And as is true of Kansas, I can make a legitimate argument that another album is actually their most outstanding creation. For Steely Dan, that's Asia, which in my opinion is probably one of the, pick a number, let's say 5, greatest albums of all time. But like the comparison between Point of No Return and Leftoverture, there's something about the songs on The Royal Scam that takes it ever so slightly higher for me as a listening experience. Kid Charlemagne, which leads off the album, is my favorite Steely Dan song of all time. And everything that comes after it on the album just keeps that good vibe going. There's also a variety to the material on The Royal Scam that isn't affected as much by the perfection and polish that pervades every second of Asia. Asia is a spectacular album for showing off your sound system. On a desert island, I'm probably not listening to music on state-of-the-art audio equipment. I've probably got a portable disc player and some cheap headphones. So the songs of The Royal Scam outrank the sonic sheen and technical brilliance of Asia in that specific scenario. I asked myself, if I were heading off to a desert island, what voice would I be sad if I could never hear again? For me, that voice belongs to Ann Wilson. I could pick any of Heart's 1970s albums really, but I decided to go with Little Queen, their second studio release. Again, mostly for the mix of material that appears on it. Little Queen has some terrific vocal performances by Ann, starting with the absolutely ferocious Barracuda, but also songs like Love Alive, Kick It Out, Cry to Me, and the title number, Little Queen. There's just something in Ann's voice that speaks to me way down deep inside, whether she's raging on a rocker or caressing every note on a sweet lyrical ballad. I can't imagine how heartbreaking it would be, no pun intended, if I never had the chance to hear Ann Wilson's incredible voice ever again. And then, once I'd covered the voice I couldn't live without hearing again, I thought about an artist whose music I wouldn't want to be without forever. That artist is Prince, who passed away 9 years ago to the day as I'm recording this video. Prince left behind something like 40 completed studio albums, plus a wealth of unreleased material. So choosing just one Prince album is a daunting task in itself. I considered several: Controversy, 1999, Around the World in a Day, Sign of the Times, Love Sexy, Diamonds and Pearls. But I just kept coming back to Purple Rain, an album that Prince frequently equaled but never completely surpassed. Every track on this record just flat out crushes. It's an album that rocks, swings, dances, rages, and at times reduces me to a mushy, weepy puddle. It's also Prince at his collaborative peak, as we get to hear an actual band, The Revolution, on 6 of the 9 tracks. Prince is perhaps the single greatest musical artist of my lifetime in terms of every conceivable aspect: singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer, and icon. I would have to have one Prince album on that island. I would want one album that would always bring me inner peace on days when desert island life just seemed like too much to bear. The voice of Eva Cassidy has that quieting effect on my spirit. I talked in one of my Magical Voices videos, and again, if you haven't watched any of those, you owe it to yourself to go check them out. But I talked in one of those videos about the heartrending history of Eva Cassidy, who passed away due to cancer before the world truly had an opportunity to discover her gifts. It was 5 years after her passing before a couple of DJs on BBC Radio began playing and promoting Eva's music. And suddenly the world understood what it had been missing and what it had lost. The album Songbird, a compilation of songs from the 3 albums released by Eva during her lifetime, showcases her crystal clear voice at its glorious finest. There will be days on that desert island when only Eva Cassidy's renditions of Over the Rainbow, or Christine McVie's Songbird, or Sting's Fields of Gold will pull me back from the brink. Just as there would be times when my soul needs the soothing tones of Eva Cassidy, there would be moments when nothing but some grungy, funky, just straight up stanky, blues-based rock and roll would do. And for that, I need ZZ Top's DeGueo. Their cover of the Sam and Dave classic, I Thank You, is masterful, followed by their original tunes, She Loves My Automobile, I'm Bad, I'm Nationwide, A Fool for Your Stockings, Manic Mechanic, and of course, the legendary Cheap Sunglasses. You get Billy Gibbons' snarling, nasty guitar and vocals, Dusty Hill's crunchy bass, Frank Beard pounding out time on the drum kit. Some days on that desert island, it's gonna get rough. And when the going gets rough, you call the rough boys in. Because I can only take 8 albums, I can't fit so many of the bands I love into my island bag. Bands like Styx, Queen, Boston, ELO, Supertramp, Foreigner, Journey. Fortunately for me, there's one band whose sound encapsulates all of those I just mentioned, plus several more, but does it in their own uniquely original way, and that is Cats in Space. Any of their albums would be worthy of packing for my desert island drop-off, but my absolute favorite recording by Cats is Kickstart the Sun, their 2022 release. This album is track after track of catchy, hook-laden arena rock goodness that immediately takes me back to every concert I attended in the late 70s and early 80s. It's tuneful, it's bombastic, it's meticulously written, crafted, and performed by a band of Brits who love classic rock and know how to show it. Kickstart the Sun would make up for all of the albums by all of my favorite bands that I couldn't bring along. And my last choice, the last niche I need to fill, would have to be the one legendary album that I just couldn't leave behind. The album that would serve to remind me of just how wonderful and amazing the activity of making music can be. When I started this exercise, I had thought that this slot would be taken by a Beatles album. But then I couldn't choose just one Beatles album. And besides, All of those Beatles songs that I love are so deeply and inextricably ingrained in my consciousness that even if I never hear them again, they live inside me and I know them all like best friends. So that brought me to Who's Next, which for me ranks right up there with the greatest of the Beatles and Steely Dan, among the finest recordings of the rock era. If you asked me to name a perfect album, and it can't be either a Beatles album or Asia, it's gotta be Who's Next. Not a weak moment anywhere. The crystallization of Pete Townshend's songwriting genius, along of course with John Entwistle's delightful My Wife, melded with the perfect ensemble to perform those songs. I could begin every day with Baba O'Reilly and end it with Won't Get Fooled Again. And those would be good days, even on a desert island. If I could only take 8 albums to a desert island for the rest of my days, these would be the 8. Unless you ask me tomorrow, in which case it might be a totally different 8. But if we left today, this is the list. What does your desert island discs list? Desert Island Discs list. Yes, say that 5 times fast. What does yours contain? Only 8 albums for the rest of your life. What would you choose? Let me know in the comments. While you're down there, please hit this video with a thumbs up. And remember to subscribe to this fine channel if you haven't already. We're always coming up with musings about classic rock and pop music and who knows what else. So make sure you don't miss a single video. Until I see you back here in the nest, please be well and do well for the people around you. And you know I'm going to ask, is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car.